Welcome to From Garage to Growth. And this is the podcast where we look at the movers and shakers within the entrepreneurship space. I'm your host, Brian. And today's guest is proof that your roots don't define your reach. Welcomed by Raymond, a chartered accountant, turned entrepreneur, community builder, and author. Uh, on the other side, recently published book, of course, The First Generation of Founder. And today we're kind of going to dive into the power of sports to transform communities, the thrill of coding African solutions for African problems, and how does one walk away from a thriving corporate career, from a safe, we're going to use the word very safe on loosely, especially with the current corporate climate. So to kick things off, I'd just like to give you the floor, Raymond. Introduce yourself and let the audience and listeners know who you are.
Sure. Thanks, Brian, for the opportunity. So I grew up in Soweto, Proteas land, had a really wonderful childhood, quite blessed and privileged to have grown up in a family with two parents. And I know how sometimes that is something that can often be overlooked and not seen as a great privilege. But for me, I am aware of just how wonderful that was to grow up with a very present father who really did a lot of work to just raise me and my siblings in a very safe, loving household. My mother was also a wonderful human that really did the best for us and took care of us. Unfortunately, she suffered a stroke when I was 15 years old, and I was in high school. And I think that also affected, a lot of my development as a young man, having had to now grow up without that, I suppose, strong bond that one would typically have with their mom, especially as you're growing and now you're starting to date and that world.
Yeah,
but now was really she was quite sick. And for 15 years of my adult life, she was 15 when she got a stroke and she passed away when I was 30 years old. For that 15-year period, I had to watch her suffering and watch her in a lot of pain. But my dad, man, really played a great role in ensuring that she felt safe, she felt loved, she was taken care of. And he also did a great job in just making sure that, the whole family unit was intact. And I speak about that because that is quite an important foundational element, I think, in anyone's journey to adulthood, growing up in a stable, loving family. It's quite an important thing because I think it helps you with your confidence. It helps you with having, being sort of sure of your place in the world, and knowing that you've got these people who will always be there for you. It gives you a certain level of assurance, a certain level of, I suppose, confidence and comfort in knowing that you can always go back to this unit. And so I've been quite blessed to have that. And I think that safe, strong family unit has then allowed me to explore many things that have led me to being where I am. My dad was quite keen on education. So when I was in high school, he took us to this wonderful high school. So I did my primary school in Soweto in Proteas land. Was quite good, I would say, because my dad was quite present, right? He would make sure he sit me down, would do my homework. He would, after work, on weekends, he would force me to study these multiplication tables. And so I couldn't go play until I'd done those things. So that foundation was quite strong. I did quite relatively well in a township primary school. And then he took me to this Model C, high school where I moved from an environment where I was taught by Black people to an environment where all the teachers were white. The student body was predominantly Black, but all the teachers were white. And for me, that was a shock, right? And that school is called Raukol. I'm not sure what it's called now. And that Raukol was the Rand Afrikaans University College for the Advancement of Learning and Leadership. So that's the high school that I went to. It was sponsored by Metropolitan. And it was a sister school or a feeder school to the former Rand Afrikaans University, which is now the University of Johannesburg. So that school was quite a shock, culture shock, because I came from an environment where with my friends would speak Soweto Zulu. And now I was with these black kids during lunch and everybody spoke English. And it was like quite weird. Most of them came from, like private schools at primary and things like that. And then, in class, you taught by these white teachers. So for a while, for about 4 years, I think I was adjusting to that setup. So my grades were quite average, Yeah, I flew under the radar for most of my high school. I was also experiencing shock. I didn't realize it at the time because my mother had just gotten a stroke. So at home was this sort of like turmoil of dealing with an ailing mother. We didn't know how to deal with, the whole situation. And it only was in matric that my dad sat me down and said, hey man, look, you gotta like really do something with your grades because you need a bursary. It's a bursary or nothing. And I remember as a kid growing up, like I would see these letters that were from Old Mutual and it was like savings. It was actually addressed to me. So the letter would be addressed to my dad / Raymond, which meant my dad had taken out these policies for us and for his kids, right? And these policies were savings that he would always say, this is what's going to take you to school, to universities. I thought I was fine. I thought I would be safe.
Yeah, you're relaxed.
I was quite relaxed. I thought, oh, look, if I have to go to varsity, there are some form of savings because I grew up seeing the letters, right?
Yeah.
When my mom got sick, I didn't know. My dad obviously then,
priorities had to shift
and use those savings. So when he sat me down and said, look, you got to really pull up your socks. I remember I changed my routine completely. So when I would come back from high school, so I would catch the train. The school was in kind of like Brixton, Crosby, Auckland Park area. So I'd take the train from Langlaagte train station, get off Naledi train station, either walk home or take a taxi to Protea Glen. So I would arrive home around 4 or 5 p.m. in the afternoon, and I would just go to bed immediately. As soon as I got home, I would sleep. So that was my new routine in matric. And then I would wake up at midnight, right? And then I would study because at that time, like everything is quiet. There are no distractions. So my whole of my matric life, I would wake up at midnight and study until 5, shower, go to school. And then I did that.
Damn.
Yeah. I did that whole routine throughout my matric year. And it paid off because then I got really better grades. I was in the top 10 in my matric year, which was something that I never even thought would be possible for me because I was really bad, man. I was getting very average grades from grade 8 until grade 11. And then I was lucky to get a bursary. Metropolitan came through because they sponsored our school and they awarded me a bursary. I actually don't talk about this in the book. And like the process of writing a book, one realizes that you've written a book. That, oh my God, there are these rich stories that I just didn't think about at the time that should have ended up in the book, but didn't.
in the book.
So here, right? So when I was in matric, I actually wanted to be an engineer. I didn't want to be an accountant. So I became a chartered accountant, but that wasn't the plan. I wanted to be an engineer. I wanted to fix aeroplanes, an aeronautical engineer. And I had actually applied at UJ. It was RAW at the time. I'd applied for mechanical engineering and got accepted into a mechanical engineering program. And because I knew this financial situation of not having money, I had applied for engineering bursaries. But I could only find one engineering bursary, which came back and offered me an interview. And that company was Group 5, the construction company. And they gave me a bursary interview, I think it was sometime in November of my matric year or October of my matric year. So it was late in the year. And then I thought, okay, cool. How am I going to like knock that out of the park? How am I going to make sure I get this? So I thought, well, I need to be prepared. What's the best way to be prepared? The best way to be prepared for interviews. And remember, like in matric, I've never been to an interview before.
No interview, nothing. No experience of what you need to do, how to prepare yourself.
You see, so then I thought, let me apply for other bursaries. The best way to be prepared for Group 5 if I get into other bursary interviews, I'll be ready by then. And luckily, I got into 3 bursary interviews, but they were for accounting. So it was Metropolitan, the first interview that I went to in like June of my matric year. PwC and Ernst & Young also called me up for interviews. And in my mind, I was like, this is accounting, no pressure. Just go there, be yourself. You don't even want this thing. You're just there for the experience.
Just tasting the waters.
Yeah. By the time group 5 comes, you'll be so ready. My very interview that I went to was Metropolitan. 3 days later, they called me and they said, congratulations, we have picked you. I was like, okay, this is not part of the plan, right? I wasn't meant to be picked. I was just there for practice.
Experience.
For experience. And then they said it for 3 side, right? So now I'm in June. I've been accepted for this bursary, but I have to study accounting. And I kind of lied in the interview because they asked, have you applied for accounting? And I said, yes. I had applied and been selected for engineering, right? So I said, yeah, I've applied for accounting. Because I didn't know they were going to give me the thing. So
they didn't do the background check at all to check, did you actually apply for accounting?
How are they going to do that check? I don't even, they trust that you know what you want in life. If you say you've applied, right? So I remember I spoke to my dad. I told him, look, man, this unexpected thing has come up. I want to be an engineer. I just wanted to be ready for my interview in November, group 5. But here's the situation. What do I do? And then my dad was like, listen, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. So just take it because you don't know. What if you decline this interview? This opportunity. And then the interview that you think will go well, which is the engineering one with group 5, doesn't. What happens then? So I had to go to Rao, walk to the faculty of engineering and ask them to hand me my application. At the time, it was hand-filled applications. So I asked to give it to me. And then I walked across the campus and I went to the faculty of economic and management sciences, walked to the accounting department and said, do you still have space? Luckily, there was space. And then I just handed in my application then. And that's how I became an accountant, a chartered accountant. So the bursary from Metropolitan helped me go to UJ, to Rao. We were the last group to see the university still as Rand Afrikaans University. So this was 2004. And then 2005 onwards, it became the University of Johannesburg. I did my accountancy degree there, did an honors. And then after I did my honors, Metropolitan called in their, I wouldn't say favor, but debt. They called it and said, listen, we paid for you to study this accounting. It's time.
Now we need that experience to work for us.
Yeah. So I needed to go work in Cape Town. In fact, it was after I got my degree. Metropolitan only sponsored me for 3 years, which is just my degree. And so I told them no, look, I'm not ready to come work. I actually want to do my honors. And they said, well, we can't pay for your honors. We want you to come work now. So I said, no, I can't, but still didn't have money for how I was going to pay for my honors program. Luckily, PwC funded me for my honors year. But then PwC had and their condition was, if we fund you for this 1 year, you have to do your articles with us. Made a plan between PwC and Metropolitan said, fine, do your honors with PwC, but you still owe us 3 years for us having paid for your degree, right? Your undergraduate degree. So you still need to come work for us at some stage. So after your articles with PwC and you qualify to be a CA, you owe us 3 years. So I had to repay 6 years of my education. But it's not a bad thing because you've got a job, right? And you're getting experience. And so after I did my, honors degree, did articles at PwC in 2010. So I started PwC in 2008. in 2010, I was finishing to qualify to be a chartered accountant. And then PwC said there's a great opportunity for you to go to the US on secondment. So I went to Chicago for about 5 months and then Cincinnati for 2 months. And when I came back, then I was a qualified CA, and then I needed to go pay my debt to Metropolitan in Cape Town. I didn't want to go. My mother was sick. I just didn't want to leave Joburg. And something amazing, I don't know if it's an amazing thing that happened, but serendipity maybe, right? Because Metropolitan merged with Momentum in the year that I was supposed to go work for them. And with every merger, when companies merge, there are redundancies. Now, the one job that was a job that was done by one person, because now 2 companies come together, that same job, you've got 2. So you have to kind of let one person go. So Metropolitan didn't have jobs to give me or a job to give me. And so they called me and they said, sorry, we can't offer you that job. But there was a clause in my contract that said if they can't offer me a job, that contract is void.
So it worked out.
My debt was wiped clean. I didn't have to Metropolitan, but I'm very grateful for for them taking a chance on me and funding my education. I certainly wouldn't be here without that support. But yeah, I didn't work in Cape Town, stayed in Joburg. And that's pretty much, I've just given you like a bit of my childhood, education, university to like early career days.
Yeah, it's already intriguing. And now let's go into the entrepreneurship side of things, into that journey, how that kickstarted for you. And this kind of kickstarted in March 2015 for you when your co-founder of Diski Nine9 came knocking through your door with this 8,000 Rand tournament proposal. What about that proposal sparked your intrigue in that proposal? And kind of, was it something in your childhood that connected you to the idea that you're like, oh, this is something I need to be part of? What kind of got you to that stage?
Yeah, so I grew up playing soccer. I really love, I think when we started our interview, we were talking about like, I'm going through a lot of things, trying to support this team seems to not care about me because they're like really losing every match they play. But anyway, so I grew up playing football and Master Piello. So Piello at some stage was kind of like my coach growing up because of the type of school that I went to in high school. It was not in my community in Soweto. It was far. Like I said, I was taking the train. I would come home late. My passion for playing club football obviously kind of like died because I just couldn't make the time for it. So I was very connected to playing football, but couldn't because of the school and my school didn't even have sports in high school, which was quite bad. I think it killed a lot of people's potential for sports.
Yeah.
It was an academic school, which is also fine because we are where we are now because of that school. But the long and short of it is that I'm very passionate about football. In 2015, I was working for ABSA, and ABSA, I had this really cool job where I traveled a lot on the continent. And I remember I got a call. I was in Kenya, and then Piello called me and said, listen, man, when you come back, can I speak to you? There's something I want to discuss with you. When I got home from Kenya, I found him waiting for me at my gate. I was like, whoa, this guy is quite serious, right? Coming from the airport, it was late at night and he was waiting for me, right? And you remember we sat in the car and he pitched me this idea of like, listen, I want to do a soccer tournament. So Master has been in football for pretty much all of his life. He's a coach, a football coach. And like I said, coach me at some stage. So he said, listen, I've been running this tournament. I did it in Easter of 2015. It was for like young kids, under 11s and things. But now I want to do it for the older guys. So I think under 16, 17s. And I need your help. Can you actually donate for me? So his proposal, he was raising funding. He wanted his total fundraising pool was 8,000 rands. And I was like, 8K, you just need 8,000 rands and how many kids are you going to have in this tournament? And he said 300. How are you going to manage 300 kids with K? So because I knew him, I love football. I was very busy at APSA. I just thought, let me help him get his 8K. I thought I could either contribute from my own pocket, either give him the 8K or a portion of the 8K, or I could try and just get him more money, right? So I typed out his proposal. He had actually handwritten his proposal. I typed it out on the same day and I sent it out to a couple of friends, right? And I just made the amount 20,000 rands. In 24 hours, a friend of mine that I did my MBA with, Jolene John, who used to work for Old Mutual, and in 24 hours said, I'll fund this from my own department, right? And I'll give you 20K because that's what I asked for. So in 24 hours, we moved from 8,000 rands and now got 20K. And then I was like, oh, this is quite cool. Like this, I can do this. I could, easily access money like this from work. It was the first time that realization had kind of like dawned on me that, oh man, there's something here, right? And then I was a bit at a crossroads because I thought, do I just hand over the money now to this guy and walk away? Or should I try and see where this thing goes? And then I chose the path of trying to see where it goes. And I offered to help Master with organizing the tournament. I took leave and then I just fell in love with everything that I saw, right? Because then I got reconnected to being with young people, playing football, running a football tournament. Yeah, the rest is history. 10 years in now from that 8,000 request, we registered an organization. So he was just running tournaments. He wasn't even thinking of registering this thing. For him, he was passionate about football. And it's so interesting because he's such a selfless human being that he never even thought about himself in this whole thing. He just wanted 8,000 to buy medals and trophies and kits and organize this tournament so these kids could play. He never thought, what happens after the tournament? How do I make a living out of this, right? And I think for me, I was also interested in helping him sort of like formalize the structure and figure out like, how can we turn his love for football into something more meaningful? How could we make this social enterprise? So I remember asking him, like, do you have social media page for this? He's like, no. So he just had the name of the tournament, which was Diski Nine9, right? And that's it. He was like, we'll call this tournament Diski Nine9. The kids will play, and that's it. I'll be happy. So after we got the money, then we registered the organization as an NPC, set up social media pages, a fundraise for even more than the 20K. So we ended up with like 120,000 rands. I kind of overcomplicated the tournament because for him, wanted medals and prizes. And me, I was thinking, no, kids are playing. We need to have an ambulance on site. We can't. What if
safety? What if someone get hit?
What if someone, I thought, what am I going to do with food? Let's tell the story. So I brought in a friend of mine, Nawa Ratebe, who is a filmmaker. I was like, let's video this whole thing and tell the story about it. And that video actually ended up helping me a lot in my career because it landed up on the CEO's desk of APSA Capital. That short video that I thought, no, we need to really tell the story. And it opened so many other doors for me later on. Yeah.
That's the one. And you spoke about leveraging your network. For a founder, especially early stage, how do you go about leveraging your network to kind of help you throughout your early stages of being an entrepreneur? How would you advise early stage founders to kind of leverage their networks?
Your question is quite interesting because today I was just talking to my niece. She's 26, and she works in the IT space. And I was just telling her about like, she should be going to these conferences, right? Val, my fiance, is at a Women in Tech conference today. And so I was asking, why didn't you go with Val, like, to this conference? You in tech space, you could network. And then she's like, no, networking is so hard. I have to sell myself. Don't know how to sell myself. And I was just advising her that, networking is not so much about you selling yourself, but you connecting with other people and being curious about other people and trying to get to know other people. I think that's step one, right? So for aspiring entrepreneurs or young professionals, when we think about networking, sometimes we think we have to go sell ourselves. I don't think that's the case. You go to events, conferences, you build a network by building relationships. And when you have relationships with people, people do business with people they like. Unfortunately, that's the people they like and people they trust. So how do you get people to like and trust you? Well, for me, I think it's not a transactional thing. You're not out there trying to market yourself in terms of, how you could benefit and why people should either hire you, give you a job, give you funding, give you opportunities at a networking event. It's more about like how you build the relationship to get to a point where they like you and they trust you. And that takes time. And I think sometimes we don't speak about that, right? For me, for example, the ability, and sometimes we can make some things look easy, doesn't mean they are easy. So, For example, I got a proposal for 8K. Same day I typed it up, and then I got 20K in 24 hours. And it looks like I just tapped into my network and just like that managed to raise funding quickly. But that's not the case. I had a relationship with Joe that I built over 2-3 years, right? And we were friends. And when she saw that, because she knows who I am, she believed that she could put her neck on the block, take a professional risk. There's something called professional risk that I think we need to talk about, right? She was willing to be like, okay, this tournament is not even an organization. We didn't even have an organization registered. But she was willing to put her neck out on the block and help me with funding because I think she trusted me. So the idea of networking, we need to maybe rethink how we talk about it. It's not so much that you're just tapping into people who they're in your network, but they don't trust you. It's about trust.
Yeah.
Relationship.
So but building those relationships, someone. So I meet up with Will. I don't know if you know Will Green. He's a founder within Cape Town. He runs this Will Green walks on Lion's Head. So every Friday he does this walks where you just go to his website and then you can log in and register for this walk. And on this walk, you have an opportunity to spend like an hour, 2 hours where you're walking with people that you in other space you wouldn't meet. So you get to build a relationship with that person in that hour. So those type of encounters are very interesting to be part of, where in any other space you wouldn't meet that person. And I feel like a hike is a very chilled place to build a network. It's not a conference. You're outside, you're in nature, everyone's relaxed. It removes the whole professional aspect of it in terms of going to a conference. I guess other people are very shy in those spaces maybe, and then maybe they need to find other revenues of how to network.
100%. I mean, I think the whole idea is you need to accept that you're going to be uncomfortable, right? You're going to, I think, meeting people you don't know. For some of us, I'm also an introvert, right? It's uncomfortable. Like it's not an easy thing to do, to strike up a conversation that you can keep going. Society also sometimes tells us we have to be interesting, and it almost feels like minutes of silence. I think we don't know what to do with silence.
Yeah.
In a conversation, it now feels like, oh, I'm boring this person. So
it's awkward now.
It's awkward. So now you tell yourself you have to just make up stuff and make up conversation, right? But being authentic is hard, right? Being yourself is hard when you're meeting someone you don't know. And in your head, you think, I have to network with this person and I need to something out of that relationship, then you automatically are not going to be yourself, right? Because you are chasing something with this new person that you've just met. So it's uncomfortable. You have to just accept that if you think this is important, and I think like your career is important, and it's your career, it's nobody else's career. Nobody's going to build it for you, right? So if you're starting your own business, it's your business. No one is going to build it for you. You have to build it for yourself, which means you have to put yourself out in situations that are going to make you uncomfortable. And for me, I think the trick is just trying as best as you can to just be yourself. Step one, just be yourself. If there's moments of silence, let them be there. Those moments of awkwardness, let them be there. It's when you're trying to do too much that the other person might see that then things are not authentic. Things are not gonna, the relationship is not gonna build out in a way that builds trust, and it can stand the test of time. Because for me, I think that I haven't met someone today and then tomorrow they gave me business. It's just, it hasn't worked out for me. So I haven't gone on a hike, going back to your hike example. I've never gone on a hike with someone in an hour, and by the end of the hour, they're like, cool, man, let's do business.
Yes, fund, there's money for you.
Here's money, we'll fund you. How much do you need? It hasn't worked out that way. For me, it's worked out over a long period of time because there's a relationship that now the other person trusts me, I trust them. Because also, it works two ways, this networking thing, right? It's not just you selling yourself, but also you seeing whether you like the other person, whether you want to do business with the other person, because it's a relationship.
Yeah, it's a two-way road. And I want to touch on Diski 9 or the expansion of Diski 9-9. You started off as a sports tournament. Then you added netball into the scheme, but now you also run workshops that look at gender-based violence, financial literacy, and entrepreneurship. How does these programs align with the long-term vision of Diski 9-9 and as well as the long-term vision of promoting youth within South Africa?
Sure. I mean, sometimes you set out to do something. In our case, it was just a soccer tournament. It was supposed to be a one event. You realize when you get into it, and maybe passion also kicks in and fun kicks in, and you kind of like increase the scope a little bit. You start thinking about things that we're not part of the plan. So in our case, we wanted to use football as a tool, right? To do something much greater than just sports. So initially we wanted to create a safe space for young kids to come and play and enjoy and have fun, make friends, and keep them off the streets, because we grow up in communities that an idle mind, there's so many forces that are competing for their attention, and it's easy to get into drugs if you are just chilling, doing nothing. It's easy to either, hang out with the wrong crew and get into crime. I've got like a friend, took the wrong step and then ended up in prison. And so what happens when you're not busy, right, with more positive. So we wanted a safe space. That's what was our initial idea. Then we ticked that box. We created the tournament. And I am always sort of like obsessed with the question of so what, right? Like, so what, or what next? Hence, when we were speaking earlier, I was telling you like cluster economics is something that I'm starting to get an interest and an obsession in, because once you do something, especially if you're working with young people, I think it's a responsible thing to do, to think about the next step for them. So you gave them a safe space. Okay, cool. They're safe.
Yeah.
What's next? We really need to think about that next part. So for us, the next part was, okay, we are seeing these young kids, they're playing football. Most of them think they're going to be football stars, right? We need to think about how could we create opportunities for them if they don't become football stars? Because chances are the majority of them will not be football stars, but they love football. So we started thinking about like workshops. Okay, how can we like start putting in workshops that educate them on the business of sports, right? And so we established a sports hospitality program. And the sports hospitality program was meant to get these young people who really care about sports and they love sports to see that there are other business opportunities within the game, right? So we got some opportunities to work at FNB Stadium, at Orlando Stadium, at Loftus Stadium with the same group of young people. Initially, this just started as ushers, and then they started working in the VIP suites as hosts. And then we were starting to think about like, when people go watch football, there are so many things that are happening. You have to eat at the game.
Yeah.
There's the marketing side of the game. And we were going to create like a really wonderful program around like chefs and getting them to start thinking about like, oh, I could cook food that is being sold at the stadium, but then COVID hit and then that program kind of like fell apart. And we haven't had really a chance to revisit that program, but it's something that's quite crucial for us to do because it helped us get money beyond just donations. So we're starting to charge clients at these stadiums and then these young people are getting work experience. And then you realize our country is just like kind of very broken. And that's why for me, I was saying in my intro that I don't take it for granted that I grew up with two parents at home. I grew up in a very safe home. A lot of people don't grow up in that environment. They grow up in quite violent homes where there's gender-based violence happening, where the father is beating up on the mother. If it's not physical, it's emotional. If it's not emotional, it's financial. And so we saw that manifest itself in the young people that we're working with because you see how they talk to each other. You see how the coach addresses some of these kids. And, we thought we need to do something about this because if we start at least changing the wiring of these young people at an early age and start to address this issue of get to know yourself, get to know your values, get to know what's important, get to know how you respect other people. We thought we could tackle some of these issues of gender-based violence, particularly amongst boys, because we worked a lot with boys and we wanted them to start understanding how gender-based violence manifests. What's the root cause? Where does it start? How do you manage anger? How to find safer spaces for you to express yourself without it being aggressive and violent. And so we started running these gender-based violence workshops with that in mind. The organization just keeps evolving because as you do or solve one problem, you realize, oh,
there's another one.
And then you try and solve those. And sometimes it's hard, especially in the startup world, to know where to stop or to know what problems are yours to solve and what problems other people should solve. And for you, you have to stop here because, I suffer from that a lot, right? Where with the teams I lead, sometimes it's like scope creep. Well, you keep adding new things, new problems, but some of the problems are not ours to solve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's quite important, I think, if you're going to run a business or lead an organization to kind of know that you're not going to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
You have to solve all the problems in the world. And you have to sort of like put guardrails and say, I see those problems, but I can't do anything about them.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the reasons why startups are advised to find your MVP and then work on that.
Yeah.
Don't have 2-3 things that you're trying to sell. Work on the thing that's working for you, that the market needs. Focus on that and let that be what you need to work on. So I wanted to touch on, so you started Diski Nine9, you started, and you're still working in corporate at the time. In the book, you referred to how corporate life or your time in corporate acted as this incubator for you, or how we should look at our corporate roles as incubators. And at the time you were working through Diski Nine9, I feel like that was an incubator with regards to reinforcing your mind to be, oh, this is how if I wanted to go into being a founder, how this how it would work. Can you run us through, looking back at that experience, how did running Diski Nine9 and scaling it act as an incubator for you as an entrepreneur? And were there any moments during your career and during running Diski Nine9, when you started your entrepreneurship journey, you felt certain skills were under incubated that you had to develop as a founder during your journey?
Sure. I think, you know, it's quite a huge privilege, firstly, to be in a corporate. And for me, like, in two amazing corporates, PwC, and then I worked in APSA. And I was very lucky to have amazing, supportive bosses that I worked for. I actually had lunch with Dave Mparuta, who was my boss at APSA yesterday. So yesterday I met with him and we are having lunch. So I managed to, that relationship still is maintained and it's going. So I just want to say, for people who are in corporate, it's quite a privilege to be in that space. And depending on how you look at it, I know people who are quite depressed in their jobs. And they are quite just like, it's a slog every day to wake up and go into this business, and you just keep doing the same thing over and over. It's the same routine over and over. People don't see, I think, beyond their current day job in terms of what experience means and what it can do for them. So for me, I was quite clear that being in the corporates that I was in, doing the work that I was doing, like I said, it was kind of like an incubator. It was incubating certain skills that I knew one day I will need. And one of the most important ones, I think, is learning processes. I think corporates are very structured. To become a corporate, it means you are structured. You've got this department that does things this way. There are these standard operating procedures that you must follow, which ends up kind of like, for a lot of people in that daily grind of like following these standard operating procedures, most people end up getting bored. But I think it's important to understand why those procedures exist. It's important to understand why those processes exist. And if you can see that these processes are there to keep this machine going when you leave and, you start your own thing, it's important that you have processes yourself. A lot of small businesses operate without processes. Even for us, we still kind of like trying to implement certain processes and make sure that we can kind of like become a McDonald's of whatever it is that where the process is quite clear. If somebody's ordering a Big Mac, there's a way to prepare this Big Mac so that the quality is the same. If you eat a Big Mac from Rosebank and you eat a Big Mac from Cape Town and Durban, it must taste the same, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere in the world, a Big Mac has to taste the same because customers want that taste wherever they are in the world. But it's because McDonald's has very defined processes in place that ensure that, this patty has to be cooked at this temperature. The bun has to be prepared in a particular way. The ketchup, you squeeze this much ketchup in this thing. For me, that's incubation. If you are in that process where you're seeing this in corporate unfold, you're seeing these processes unfold. Yes, if you are in the mix, sometimes it's boring because you're the one like squeezing this ketchup onto this bun, right? But I would urge people to really open their eyes and actually try and understand the bigger picture, understand what their role means in the whole process, in the whole system, understand what other people's roles mean. And at the end of the day, what are we doing? How are we packaging this product? How is the sum of all parts, right, coming together to create one unique thing? That experience is crucial when you do your own thing. Yes, at the beginning, you are that person who's doing everything, right? But as your business starts to grow, you hire people. And when you hire people, things can get so complicated because you can't assume that because you know in your head what must be done.
What needs, yeah.
Other people will also know. You need to tell them what needs to be done. You need to tell them, hey, we've got a process here. It's documented. Here's the standard operating procedures. You need to do 1, 2, 3, 4 in this way. And this is the outcome that we expect. And when other people come in, you need to train them to do the same. So corporate for me is the perfect place to learn processes. It seems like a very underrated thing, but when you build your own thing, those understanding processes, how processes work, how the sum of all parts come together, how that gets documented, how you can sort of like aspire to create consistency, quality in the things that you do, gets your business to be like the best. This sounds weird, right? But for me, I think that one day I want to build a business, and this sounds weird, and I'm even like worried of saying it publicly, but I would like to build a business where my staff are bored, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I build a business where my staff come to work and they're bored because they know the process has to be followed. They have to do this thing in this way, day in, day out. I think when I get to that point, I would have built a corporate, right? Because that's what...
because there's a set structure now that everyone has to follow.
Corporates are that. Most people are bored because they have to follow this structure. That structure and that process is important because it keeps this whole machine running. If I get the business to that point, and I say board from a process perspective, of course, I would like my staff members to be innovative, to be creative, to be thinking about like doing things differently. But I want to be able one day to walk away from the business and know that it's not going to collapse because processes that have been established. And I think if you look at all the amazing founders of businesses that are huge, that are big, that have become corporates, those people are no longer in the business, right?
Yeah, they've stepped away from it. It's self-funding. It runs by itself. You don't need to put your input. You just come in, check if everything's working, get out. That's how you build a self-functioning business.
It's because they've established processes that work and everybody knows what they need to do. And if you're not doing it, you get called out. If there's a performance management organization that you're not delivering, and for people to know that they're not delivering, or for your manager to know that you are not delivering, that delivery, that expectation has to be documented. It has to be clearly articulated. Success means this. You are not reaching it. Therefore, we need to talk about your place in this organization. Are you need it or not? So yeah, man, one day, I'm not there yet. We're still trying to figure out how to cement certain processes in our business. We're still trying to define what those processes, but it's not lost on me the importance of being clear that our business will really grow from strength to strength when these processes are in place. I do, though, acknowledge that sometimes those rigid processes are the reason also why big corporates collapse, right? Because...
the lack of innovation, was you become way too comfortable in that process. And then that's why you get left behind when another company comes in, changes the process, and you're like, this was your space. Why didn't you innovate? That definitely happens a lot.
Catch-22, right? Because if you are too settled and too comfortable in your processes, a startup that doesn't have the rigid processes is going to... But for startup also to really grow, at some stage, it can't just be a free-for-all. It can't just be like we do whatever we want. These processes are crucial. So going back to your question, for me, building Diski Nine9, working at Absa, I was in an incubator. I was learning these processes. I was learning what works. I was meeting people in the bank that connected me and my business and Diski Nine9 to opportunities. I was lucky that, Absa was in sports. It was sponsoring the Absa Premiership. So they kind of like understood, and they were quite also open and encouraged staff members to do things beyond their day job. And my boss, David Baruta, that I spoke about, was so instrumental in helping me push Diski Nine9 because he got it. He also volunteered for my organization, which was weird to have your boss work in your little startup and things. But yeah.
Which is great. So you've got the skills, you've got the drive, you've got the idea. What pushed you specifically to kind of start the IT Think Smart Solutions? What idea did you guys see in terms of there's a market here, we can corner that market, let's start this?
My brother started it, Jeff, with Gideon Ogongo, his friend, who's our CIO now. So when I was in corporate at APSA, my brother had been working on this small business, the startup, for a while. It's an IT business. They actually started out training people in various IT or various technologies, systems, and processes. And they kept on asking me to come join them. I had just completed my MBA, and they were like, "Dude, we really need someone with your skills. We are very technical." My brother is a software developer. He's an electrician, electrical engineer, and taught himself software development. And then Gideon is like a fully fledged software developer. He's just like, he lives code, like is researching system architecture and new technologies. So these guys were techies, had built this business. It was starting to do well. They were winning work, they were winning clients, but they were making very big mistakes on the business side. They told me one day that signing contracts that maybe they shouldn't sign because they don't know what to look out for. And I think they assumed I would know, right? I would know how to fix the business side. And so for a while, they just kept asking me to come join them. And then in 2017, I said yes, I would come without a plan. And I quit my job and I joined them. And they said, "You want to be the CEO? You're a chartered accountant, MBA. You know what to do." And it's so crazy. And I think this is partly why I wrote the book, is because I found myself in a situation where I have to lead now a small business. We had a couple of employees in the business, a couple of clients in the business. And I had no clue what does a CEO do of a small business. We assume that because you went to business school, you should know these things. And yeah, sure, you would know from a theoretical perspective how to approach certain issues. You know what kind of things need to be in place. But there's a difference between knowing things from a book and actually doing them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the practical side of things is always different.
The practical is always different because what you quickly learn is that the stuff that you learn in a book is very contextual. It's how people dealt and solved certain problems that might have been very specific to their cases, their environment. And yours there's always nuance, right, to everything. And so if you are trying to copy paste the solution you learned in a book in your unique circumstance, you will realize that certain things don't apply. And it was quite challenging for me to figure out what's my job? How do I do it? And I said, I wrote this book, First Generation Founder, because I found myself in a situation where I was first generation CEO of a business. There is no one in my family I could go to who was a CEO that could sit me down and say, "Oh, that's easy. What problem do you have? Ah, man, you're over.
I went to do this long time ago.
Yeah, how I solve this problem. You just need to do this. You need to think about this. Do you have someone in your business who could do this? Someone who could give you practical experience because they've done it. I didn't have that. So I remember for the first 6 months or so of joining IT Think, I was quite depressed. And my depression really came from finding myself in this new space where I had a title, right? In this small business, I saw how important my role was, but I was struggling to figure out how to solve certain problems. And we had some really big problems that needed to be solved at the time. I remember when I joined, we had just lost our biggest client. So for a whole year, we were struggling with revenues, and I was relying on my pension, cashed out my pension. So every day I was going to this job with my brother, trying to build this business, trying to solve these problems of like, how do we win work? And it was challenging because I didn't know, like, and then we've got, a team, and then like this different perspectives and opinions in terms of how we should do things. And it was quite chaotic, and it was quite depressing because also I didn't like have that structure, that routine that I used to have in my corporate job of knowing, okay, at this time we do this, at this time we do this.
Yeah, if there's a fire, this is how we put it out.
And it's ironic because that structure for most people at some stage gets like boring, like I was saying. And people want to leave that structure. But when you leave that structure, you realize actually you need some form of in your life. So you start wanting the routine. But when you're in the startup world, there's no routine. Every day is completely different. And you are the one that has to be quite disciplined to do certain things. Nobody's chasing you for any report. Like, you don't have a boss. You don't have, you are your own boss. If you say today, I don't want to go to work, it's fine. You don't go to work. If you say, chill, watch TV, you do that. It's your choice. But at the back of your mind that, man, there's this discomfort of doing nothing, but you also don't know what to do. So it's quite a very precarious position because it can get overwhelming, right? It can be overwhelming. And that's why it's important at some stage to seek help. So in my case, I was lucky, again, network. I was lucky that I could ask someone who was a CEO of I would say, SMME, small business, but it's quite successful. So I reached out to a mentor of mine, Derek Thomas from Letsema, and Letsema is quite a successful business. And I sat him down and I said, listen, I'm an accountant. I'm running a technology business. I'm supposed to be the CEO, but I have no clue what to do. What do you do? You are a CEO. You've built a successful business. What do you do? And I'll never forget this. And I tell him all the time when I see him how his advice kind of transformed the next phase of my journey in small business. And he said to me, as CEO of a small business, you only need to just focus on two things. And if you focus on just these two things, you're going to be fine. The first one is you have to find clients. Like, you have to be obsessed with how do you make money. That's your number one thing. Secondly, you have to be involved in hiring people. That's it. Because if you find work, people need to deliver that work. So then you focus on how to hire the best people. If you have the best people, the work will be delivered. And he says, just keep doing that. Then you're going to be fine. And I think that advice was quite helpful for me because my accounting mind wanted to come in and fix the finances, fix the financial statements. Because when I came into the business, man, it was a mess. These two software developers didn't look after financial statements. Our financial system was there, but it was a mess. So I thought, hey, maybe let me come in and look and fix that. But
look at the books.
Look at the books. But you see, the problem about the books is that the books are backward looking. It's history. It's what has happened in the business. Sure, it's important information. But if I spend all my energy and time looking at what's happened and fixing it and say, oh, this we said was, asset, but it's actually an expense, right? And now I'm busy fixing technicalities that are going to end up in a financial statement on a piece of paper. As a small business, that's not going to help us grow. What is important is, do we have money? Do we have clients?
Yeah, future outlook.
It was quite tough for me to see that our financial system is a mess and to say, okay, I'm not going to do anything about that. That's not the most important thing right now. Right now, what's the most important thing is how do we find work, And because we're a software development and consulting business, It meant going out, speaking to people, speaking to clients, trying to find work. And a year in, we found one of our biggest clients. And then I could be like, okay, cool. Now revenue is coming. Let's go back and fix the financial mess, the financial systems, the, financial statements and things like that. And I think we outsourced that work, got good accountants to help us. And yeah, so that's the backstory with IT Think Smart Solutions. I didn't start it. My brother started it. I always debate this name, IT Think, but anyway, that's it. One day we will rebrand, hopefully. But again, that's not the most important thing right now. And I think also in a small business, sometimes we can obsess over things like
the smallest things.
The smallest things that don't matter, like the name of the business. So, cool. I mean, it's important. The name of the business is important from a marketing position, placement and things like that. But build a solid business. And then if you need to rebrand, you rebrand later,
And from the moment you got in to the point where the company is functioning, you eventually branched out to IT gaming. Can you run us to how that passion kind of grew? How your love of gaming, how did that start?
Yeah. So, a lot of things in some way in my life feel like they've been happy accidents, Going back to how I got to become an accountant, for example, it feels like it was a happy accident. I didn't intend to be an accountant. I just wanted to get interview skills. And then Metropolitan gave me a bursary and then I had money. And then I became an accountant. Similarly, the gaming business feels like a happy accident. Writing the book feels like a happy accident because I never set out to do those things. I never planned that I would run a gaming business as an accountant. So the backstory is that I've always loved games, right? Growing up, I grew up, the house, my neighbor had a arcade, right? Growing up. And so I grew up playing Street Fighter. I would borrow money from my parents. They didn't know borrowing it, right? Reaching out into their pockets and getting 50-cent coins, go to the arcade, and I would spend the whole day there. As a kid, it was magic. Being in that space was I would not even think of eating. When you're there,
you're
there in the morning and you leave when they close and you realize you didn't even eat. And you're just watching people play games. If you're lucky, you played games yourself. So I've always grown up playing games. So that's the one side. And then I love playing FIFA in particular. In varsity, we used to play it on our computers. So, and FIFA connects with football. So, so that world is something that
happy marriage.
Happy marriage. And then COVID comes and Diski Nine9 has to run a netball program. And we start the netball program, but then go into lockdown and we were funded for this program. And then in August of 2020, the funder is asking for a report. And we're like, come on, what do you mean you want to report? We had to pause the program. And then something just out of the blue, an idea kicked in to say, well, but wait. Yes, we know you funded us for a netball program, but it's not safe for kids to be playing right now. Can we divert that funds into something else? Can we do something that is still sports? So you can say, check the sports part, but it's safe for the kids to play because there's no physical contact. And we stumbled onto esports. So then I remember in my FIFA days, my love for FIFA, and the funder said, yeah, sure, that actually sounds like a cool idea. And, during COVID, gaming was booming. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody was stuck at home playing games, buying games. So we did an esports tournament, FIFA tournament for Diski Nine9, right? And I was like, wow, this is really cool, man. Doing the research and understanding how big that industry is. Something stood out though that if this industry is so big, where are African games? So at the time, I had this very good friend of mine, Robin Bleekers, who was helping me with Diski Nine9 and with this esports tournament. And I asked him this question. I was like, dude, why aren't these kids playing? Why have we given them FIFA? No disrespect to FIFA. I love FIFA. It was like, surely we could have found a game made in Africa and then they compete and play that for this tournament and this competition, right? And that question led to the birth of a business, really, because we went down a rabbit hole of trying to find, number one, African developed games that could be used in esports tournament. And we didn't really succeed because there aren't major blockbuster games developed in Africa that could be played in that type of esports environment. So Robin, who is a management consultant, he actually worked at Litsim. I met him through Derek Thomas, the mentor that I told you about, which is quite great that I met Robin. And Robin and myself were like, cool, if we can't find these games, let's build them. An accountant and a management consultant, but it's psychology also. And we're like, sure, let's build African games. So we then formalized it. My IT Think Smart Solutions experience taught me that, but a video game is just a piece of software, right? So I have really good relationships that I built in that tech business. I reached out to Microsoft. Microsoft helped us out. We got funding. I'm a very good fundraiser, by the way, because of my of my finance background and being a chartered accountant world. So I'm a very good fundraiser, and I find myself in situations where I can raise the funding, just like I did to help Master with the starting Diski Nine9. Often don't have the technical skills to deliver the thing that needs to be delivered. So in this case, we know we want to make African games. I've gotten funding, but we have no clue how to go about it. So Robin and I, and then later on, bring on another friend, Newaratebe, co-found this organization. We then figure out try to figure out how do we build a video game. I think step one is to find talent, right? Hire people who are devs to build it and artists to build it. But where do we get them from? So we start realizing that, the African gaming landscape is still in its infancy. That talent kind of needs to be developed. If you do find experienced game developers and artists, we knew we couldn't afford them, right? With the money that we had raised in a startup space. So we thought, okay, if we can't find this talent, how about we train it and start an academy? So then we started with an academy, but we have no trainers because we're not developers. The industry is small enough and very collaborative. We speak to people who lead us to other people, and then we find like-minded people who want to develop the gaming ecosystem in Africa. And we were lucky to meet Aram Tawia, based in Ghana. He runs one of the oldest game studios on the continent called Leti Arts. And then Aram says to us, yeah, happy to help you guys. I'll help you guys develop the curriculum and I'll help you train. So we start training young people, and then we issue a call, right, for applications. 400 people apply. Oh my God, we only have space for 30, right?
What a demand.
Yeah. And now we're like, oh, wow. So a lot of young people love playing games, and that now they see themselves also building them. Cool. And they want to learn how to build them. So out of the 400 people that applied, we could only take 30 into our academy that, Aram and other professionals in the industry trained. We also saw a certain group of people who didn't need entry-level training because they had started building their own games and they were self-taught. And we thought, no, man, these people don't need games. They need funding. They just need supported to continue building their own games. So we started an incubator, right? So then we started an academy and started an incubator and then funded them. It wasn't lots of money, but based on the money we had, to us, it was a lot of money. And we're quite proud because some of those studios, we funded 3 studios, and one of the studios used the money to buy hardware, right? Buy computers, because the computers they were coding on were not up to scratch. Another studio outsourced the work to a studio called Space Salad, and we're quite happy. I mean, that relationship is ongoing right now. It's still happening. So long story short, the need to fulfill reporting requirements for a netball tournament led to a gaming company being established. It started out as a training academy, became an incubator. We got approached by a university later on to say, hey, we also want to get into the space. You guys seem to know what you're doing, which was quite interesting that we had become experts that could build and help out a university in a short space of time. But the truth is that the industry is so small and it's still in its infancy. There aren't a lot of very experienced people. We do have a few experienced studios in the country in South Africa. There's 6 of them. We call them the big 6. But beyond that, everybody's a novice. Everybody's really trying to learn and build this industry out. And, people like us who I think are not developers, people who have different skill sets, me in finance and accounting, I think those skills are quite crucial in helping this industry grow, because the industry is full right now with people who are developers, people who want to make the game. But I think we need a broad range of skills to make it really go far. We need lawyers, we need marketers, we need PR people, we need operations, project managers, and I think that's what we are good at IT Think Gaming. We've got like a very broad range of skills. Now we've got developers in the team, because once we had set up the academy and incubator, we also realized that you're training these young people. Where do they go after? You remember I told you the so what question.
Yeah, what happens after this? After you help someone, what happens after that?
Yeah, so for us, we thought we need to also have our own studio, right? Because now created the talent, we've incubated some SMMEs, and we're seeing after the program ends, there is really no industry yet on their own, or they quit, right? Because they can't find jobs in the market. So we said, we're going to set up our own studio. Fast forward to 2024, we managed to get a jobs fund grant that is quite substantial. We formed a consortium with 6 other organizations, and that consortium is called AfriGames Consortium. And we are really trying to grow this South African gaming ecosystem from the ground up. And yeah, we are at the forefront of that. And again, it's quite a happy accident, because all of it really starts from a netball tournament that needs a report.
And I feel like in 2023, you had the opportunity to go to Gamescom, right?
Gamescom.
How was that experience? Because for me, in 2023, I was in Bonn at that time, and I was doing German classes, and I didn't know this event was hosted I've watched it many times, but I didn't know where it was hosted all the time. So I'm in class, and my teacher is like, "Oh, me and my husband usually go to this game event, which is happening at this time of the year." And I'm like, no, man, I know most of the game events that happen that are shown globally. What are you talking about? So she's like, Gamescom. I'm like, what do you mean Gamescom? And she's like, yeah, Gamescom is happening right now in this week. I'm like, no, it's not. Then I go online, I look, oh, it's happening in Cologne. I've watched the thing so many times, but I never knew what country it usually runs. And I'm like, I'm here, and I didn't even know it was happening. How was that experience to be part of that community as a game developer yourself, or running a company that develop games?
Yeah, man, it was, my mind was blown, firstly, because of just sheer size of Gamescom. So Gamescom is one of the biggest gaming events in the world. At its height, I think 300,000 people go to it.
Yeah, it was packed. I managed to go the Friday because the Sunday tickets were all sold out.
Yeah. So, you get to that space. And for me, I think it was validation, right? To really appreciate that games are not just a play thing. It's not like toys. And I say that the greatest of respect for the toy business. I suppose the frustration I have in us selling the gaming industry locally to either investors or corporates that could come on board, or like government, is that seen as a plaything. It's not seen as a commercially viable industry. So going to Gamescom, I could see I'm not mad. Like, we are not crazy. Working, trying to develop this gaming ecosystem on the continent, we are not crazy. Other continents, other countries figured this thing out a long time ago, set up policies that would make the industry itself grow and support mechanisms for studios that could build prototypes and build games that eventually go and become global sensations. So that was the first realization going there, was like, we are onto something. We are not mad. The second realization was quite a depressing one, because, once you realize that this industry is viable and it's big, you also realize what you're up against. You see all the Goliaths.
Yeah, the established Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get to learn how long they've been doing this. And you get to learn the budgets of the games that they develop. And you're like, man, I'm struggling to just like raise a amount. Even my small amount of money that I'm trying to raise is peanuts. It doesn't even get you far. Then you hit by the realization also of just how tough it's going to be to do this thing and to do it well. When you see the competition and you see that there are so many people that have more budgets than you, more experience than you, more skills than you, they've got an already established audience that is looking for their products. Then you realize, oh my God, like, it's going to take years and years and years and years for us to have a hit. So it's quite it's a roller coaster of emotions, realizing we're not mad, but oh my God, it's going to be so tough. But then you also meet other smaller studios and startups from Germany, from, across Europe, and you see how dedicated and passionate they are, and how they are quite clear that we are the Davids in this fight and we're going to take one down.
Like, I feel like recently the game industry has shifted, where like we spoke about before, the established companies, they became so comfortable, and they've, like Ubisoft, for example, the Assassin's Creed series, it's always the same. And I feel like I'm playing the same game all the time. Yeah. Where the companies that are coming up are kind of introducing innovative games, innovative game solutions, new mechanism. So it changes the game industry completely. Where the AAA companies are kind of just, it's like a factory. It's become a factory because you know your product, you know what people want, and so you're just recently releasing the same thing every year, and people are getting tired of that. So I feel like it shifted a lot of it recently, where these upcoming companies are releasing great games and they're making a lot of profit in terms of their games as well. So it's one of the reasons I love the industry so much.
Yeah. So, I mean, you also then get inspired, right? When you see people who are also in the same position that you are in, saying exactly what you're saying, that, yeah, we are working on this game. It's unique because of A, B, C, and D, and we're tackling it this angle, and we want to do this. And you're like, oh my God, okay. So yeah, there's all these huge conglomerates and like all these big organizations in the industry, but we can take them down. There's that, or rather maybe not thinking of taking them down, but we can compete. We can also put our work out there. There are people, there are gamers who are looking for different things. And so for me, it's inspiring, because I think that there is a massive opportunity for African game developers to make a big impact. And that impact for me is going to come from just having people with a particular lived experience get the opportunity to create work. And games are also art, so if you give people an opportunity they've never had before to create art, I think they're going to create art that nobody has ever seen, right? Because it's going to be art that's influenced and inspired by something completely different than what's already out there in the market. And so I think there's a great opportunity for African artists and African developers to come up with fascinating games that, if given the chance, if we have the right infrastructure, the right budgets, the right opportunities to market our work, we will have some hits, 100% sure.
Yeah. I feel like Africa is built on this sharing of stories, and games are stories. So if we just need to learn how to tell our stories through the medium of gaming. And if we can crack that code, then a lot of great games could come out from an African narrative.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many stories that we've got such a rich tapestry of culture and art. And if we just tap into that, so the question then just becomes, how do we enable this talent to be able to create and tell those stories? And for me, it goes back to that whole cluster economics thing that I'm talking about, what I was telling you about earlier, that we need ecosystems and specific activity to happen in close proximity to each other. And that can spark an industry to really thrive. If you've got within close proximity, educational institutions, incubators, accelerators, studios, funders, publishers. And so when a young person comes into this one program, when they finish, they can go. And it's their choice whether they go there or not. But those platforms need to be there. People need to have the choice of I'm not going to go to the accelerator because I'm going to just venture on my own for now. And for people to know that they can, but the ones that want to go to an accelerator should go to an accelerator. After they finish, if they want a job, they should be able to say, oh, look, there's 1,000 studios that we could interview for, right? And we could get work. But then people who are in studios that have built really good games, they could be like, you know what? I'm tired of working for this studio. I'm going to set up my own. And then they create their own startups. And then we've got an ecosystem that understands that, oh, you go to these places for funding. And when you go to these places for funding, they get it. They understand what it takes to develop a game. They understand that it's very iterative. You might start a project and not finish it because there's no appetite. Doesn't mean that the money is lost and it's gone, because you will start something else. You've already maybe built an audience. And an industry that operates like that requires funding instruments and people who have an appreciation of what it takes for such an industry to thrive. And they're not going to stifle it because they expect it to be like manufacturing, or they expect it to be like mining. Industries that we know in Africa, they are well understood. They receive tons of support and funding. It's not like fintech. I know fintech is still in its early stages, so to speak, as well on the continent. But I think fintech has gotten to a place where it's understood, right? The people understand what entrepreneurs in that space are trying to do. I think this is my assumption and my theory. But I think gaming...
It's not enough. I think it's one of the largest funding within South Africa, the African ecosystem. So people have really understood what to do in that system.
Yeah, I think gaming is where fintech was. Gaming in South Africa, in Africa, is where fintech was maybe 10, 15 years ago, right? And we just need the existing studios to stay alive until 10 years in, because I think at that stage, there's going to be lots of activity in this space. I'm hoping it's sooner. The work we are doing in gaming at Africa Games Consortium is trying to change the narrative, trying to do lots of lobbying and evangelism and activism around, the development of funding instruments in particular. That's a deep passion of mine. And I suppose because of my accounting background, we're trying to work on innovative blended finance instruments and structures that can really elevate the gaming industry on the continent. It's still early stages, but look out for some of the work that we're doing. I'm quite proud about it. And I think it's going to be a game changer. We're just trying to bring partners that are like-minded into a room, into a structure. And I think the AfriGames Consortium is the beginning of such a structure. So check it out. I think if we have more of structures such as AfriGames Consortium, because you see how our consortium is structured, it's based off the understanding that it's not just one entity that's going to change this industry, but it's collaboration. It's us coming together and saying, we want to pool our resources. You're not going to try and do this thing by yourself, right? It's important for organizations to also work on their own 100%, because collaboration and partnership is also very hard. It comes with lots of dynamics. But my wish is to see more gaming companies on the continent start to collaborate in a very meaningful way, and start pooling resources together, however little they are, because I know that it's not like we are like the fintech industry that support, but the little resources that we do have, I think if more organizations start working together and have a common goal, my hope is that we can accelerate and maybe leap.
Yeah. No, it will. It will get there. Yeah, I feel like there's a big appetite within the country or within the continent, and there's a very young generation growing up playing games, and all of us are very connected in that. So we would definitely be open to the fact of playing African games for the African audience specifically. I think there is a different market for it. It's just you need to get the developers developing those games, and that's what's needed to kind of push the conversation there. And on that notion, you were speaking about narratives, stories, and in the book you touch on this idea of identity and being in places that you're not supposed to be, and feeling, particularly from an underprivileged communities where, let's say you're Black South African, how did you change the narrative for yourself in terms of that imposter syndrome? Were you in places that you're like, am I supposed to be here? How did you maneuver through that within your entrepreneurship journey?
Look, I think there is, and I speak about a vaccine for imposter syndrome in the book, not a cure, right? Because I don't think imposter syndrome can be cured. I don't think one ever will get to a point of feeling like I don't experience it anymore, because my view, the moment you are experiencing imposter syndrome or you're feeling like maybe I shouldn't be here, to me, it means you've stretched yourself out of your comfort zone. It means that you are in a place that is new. It's unfamiliar. Hence, you are having these doubts, right? And so as long as you keep pushing yourself beyond your comfort, I think it's natural that you will be like, should I be here? Oh man, I feel like a fraud. People are going to soon find out that I don't know what I'm talking about, that they don't know what I'm doing. And to some extent, it's actually true that you might not know what you're talking about, and you might not know what you're doing because you're doing something for the first time, right? And so you need to accept and see that not as a negative thing, but as a positive thing, that you are growing. And I think once you realize that, oh, okay, I'm feeling this way because I'm doing something for the first time, that's not a bad thing. That's actually good. It means you've got room for growth. You're learning. So embrace it, right? Embrace that feeling and know that it will go away as you get better and as you start really knowing what you're talking about. And also, sometimes we think that other people know what they're doing, right? But if we are in certain rooms and certain spaces and we are feeling like the imposter in the room, we think that because we see the people maybe that inspire us, and we see people that motivate us in those rooms, and we think, but that person has got it figured out. Meanwhile, that person is probably feeling the same way you are feeling, and they are figuring it out, and they are trying to find their own space in the world and cement their space in the world. So sometimes we can overlook ourselves thinking that other people are better, but those same people are feeling the same way we're feeling. they are also bringing it. So it's hard as a Black person in particular, where you are in spaces that were never designed for you in mind,
Yeah.
and you now need to get into those spaces and be a champion and win. And the pressure also of thinking about what happens if you don't win, right, is also quite a lot, because most of us don't have a safety net.
Yeah.
Most of us need to win, right?
Yeah. It's that one opportunity. If it doesn't work out, you're at zero.
But I think also accepting that that is also not really the case, right? That you can bounce back, you can start again. You've learned a lot if you do something and it doesn't work out. We also need to accept that, yes, we might not have many more chances of like doing the same thing over and over and over again, but accepting that failure is not the end of the world, right? Yes, there will be some humiliation and some embarrassment if you try to do something, particularly publicly. When public humiliation, I think it's quite a scary thing. It's nice to fail in the comfort of your backyard where maybe you and your family just know, but once you're putting yourself out there in the public domain and then things don't work out, then they don't work out publicly. And a friend of mine was telling me, like, celebrities, for example, have a really big burden of managing failure, because when they do fail, they fail publicly and everybody kind of knows your business. And can you imagine how hard it must be for them to like pick themselves up when everybody knows their business? But we've seen a lot of people do that, where they've kind of embraced that, hey man, everybody fails sooner or later. It's not even a matter of if you fail, it's just a matter of when.
It's when. Yeah.
We will fail at something, and we just need to accept that, because if we avoid or are afraid of failing, then we will never do anything. We will never really start that business, start that project. And we learn so much in the failures and in the starting and in doing the things than we do in when things just keep going well, So it's a hard thing trying to deal with imposter syndrome. But my view is just, we need to just make peace with it. It's there for a reason. It's there to remind us. Man,
You're pushing beyond your boundaries, right?
And then you should actually be proud, right? You should actually be proud that you've stretched yourself and you're trying something new. It's just that our society doesn't deal kindly with people who try to do something and then they fail.
Yeah.
And don't succeed. So we also need to figure out how we, like there are societies that I think kind of value people who tried something and it didn't work out. I mean, like I'm sure you would have seen or read in like Silicon Valley, it's a badge of honor that.
Yeah. That act of that failure gives you that branding of, oh, we know you can do something. Maybe that didn't work out. Maybe the next one will work out.
Yeah.
Where I think as an African, it's very minute where you're like, I cannot afford to fail. Like, that fear kind of stops you from kind of going or trying something at all.
Yeah. And I mean, like some VCs in Silicon Valley will not fund you unless you can show them that you tried something and it failed. Can you imagine that being part of the evaluation criteria? Tell us where you failed and tell us with pride. Because if you haven't, unfortunately, you can't win with us. Like, Here, it's almost like you have to hide your failure at all costs. We always have to present this facade and this perspective of we are best and great at every single thing we've done. And no one is like that. Like that's not realistic, and sometimes we don't even talk about our failures enough. I write about them in the book. I write about things that didn't work out because it's part of the journey. And sooner or later, we all fail.
Yeah. It's definitely something you kind of, especially if you want to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone. It's just part of the learning curves, and you kind of pick yourself up and try, reiterate, change, and go, this is where I failed. Maybe the next time When that stage comes in, try something different. And then you shift from that. And on that notion, when you wrote the book, you speak about this pull effect of being an entrepreneur. What do you hope people get from the first generation of founder? What do you want the readers to find when they read the book? What lessons do you want them to take from reading the book? What's that thing you want people to be like, yeah, that speaks to me?
Sure. So I wrote the book for myself, if that makes sense. So I was in corporate. I had a good education, privileged to get a good education, very privileged to work in like really amazing organizations. But I always felt this pull of entrepreneurship. I always was tinkering with side hustles. I was always trying different things that had absolutely nothing to do with my job, right? And I would always hear people tell me that, look, dude, this space, you need to leave it. Like, you need to go try and do your own thing. But I was terrified. I was afraid. I was afraid of leaving corporate security, the security of a monthly salary. It's quite comforting to know that no matter what you do at work, at the end of the month, it's someone else's problem that you get paid. It's very comforting, and it's nice because you can also kind of like plan things. You can buy a house, you can buy a car, get these massive debts, and know that, well, every month I'm going to get the salary and I'll be able to pay for these things.
Pay it off. Yeah.
So for me, I hoped I could speak to people who would say to me that it's okay, that you can leave this comfort. It's going to be extremely hard. It's not going to be easy. You're going to struggle. You're going to like blow out all your savings, right? In building something that ultimately will be yours, right? Number one. And number two, in building something in a country, and I'll speak about South Africa for now because that's my context, in a country with extremely high inequality, extremely high unemployment. And my view is that for people who are privileged enough to have a good education, be in corporate spaces that teach them very specific skills, give them great networks, and people who know, right? And by the way, I know that entrepreneurship is not for everybody, and my book is not trying to sell this idea of entrepreneurship to people who are quite comfortable and happy that they are not going to be entrepreneurs. That's not the target market. The target market is for people who know, but they're scared. My message is that try it, right? You are better off really leaving that job to pursue this passion of yours, to pursue this opportunity to build something. Your chances of failure are quite high, right? But chances of success are also quite high. And if you do succeed, you make a very big impact in our country. You'll make a big impact in your family. And if you're a first generation founder like myself, and you're building something where you don't have uncles or parents and, relatives that have built a business before, you have an opportunity to change that trajectory of your family. You've got an opportunity to change the direction, and you can create more options in your family and change tradition of your family. Now I think in my family, for ones that are coming after me, they won't be first generation founders. Like, they will be able to say, we build businesses in our family, and we know that Uncle Ray built a business, and speak to him and chat to him, and I can also build a business. That was never an option for me. For me, my dad worked for one company all his life, and he would always be like, go to school and you work, find a job and you work, right? That was the direction, and he got that from the ones that came before him. And so it goes. So the book for me is targeted towards someone who was like me or is like me. They want to build their own things, but they're scared. And the message is just to say, try it, especially if you are young and you don't have quite a lot of responsibilities yet. Now is the time. Just trust and believe in yourself and know that it's not going to be easy, but it's possible. And just stretch yourself out of that comfort, because, our country needs people like you. We need more people to be starting businesses and employing one person, two people. Yeah. that's really what I hope people get out of the book. And if not, we can chat and see.
So that's great. And as we reach the end of our conversation, I usually have two questions that I ask everyone. It's very general questions. It's very personal. If you could go back and give like your younger self advice, what would that be?
I think maybe take more risks. Definitely, I'll tell me to take more risks, not to try different things. I think I was quite afraid. I tried to do things in a very particular way, tried to be very safe in a lot of things. So I would just tell myself to take more risks, to try out different things more, I'm trying to do that. I wish I had that mindset earlier. I think it would have really helped me go far now, because I was quite a conservative guy. I mean, I became an accountant.
And the last thing is, for inspiring founders, what advice would you have for them that, this is something I wish I knew during my early stage of my founding journey?
It's okay to fail. I think, it's not if, but when you fail, failure is inevitable. And I think, for me, I would say to aspiring founders, entrepreneurs, I think the biggest failure is not necessarily in doing it and starting that business and it doesn't work out. I think the biggest failure is knowing you want to start it and never even try. I think that is the biggest failure. There's no shame in you trying the thing that is in your heart and that you ought to do, and you're just too afraid to do it. That is the biggest failure for me. So just be comfortable with it. Be comfortable with this idea of things not working out, because one day they will. Trust me. I mean, I'm chasing that day that things work out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about the process and eventually getting yourself out of your comfort zone and trying things out. And the last thing, if people want to reach out, connect with you, where can people find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Raymond Ledwaba, Facebook, Raymond Ledwaba, and Instagram, Ledwaba Raymond.
Yeah. And on that is it from us.